The language of the sutra, of the verses, is beginning to change somewhat, which isn't a bad thing really, because the same principle applies. We take what we're reading and we apply it to our immediate situation. So in this next verse we've got quite a few different words from those we've been used to. So let's have a look. Verse 742. By reason of attachment, attainment, karma, birth, effect, etc., they are brought to the goal like fire. There is resemblance and non-resemblance in the principle. And there's a little footnote here. The translators added a footnote asking, is this correct? And I think this probably just applies to the last part of the verse. We'll come to that in due course. Let's have a look at the first part. By reason of attachment, attainment, karma, birth, effect, etc. We are brought to the goal like fire. All of these verses in the Sagatakam are either describing our situation or pointing to the goal, which is the truth of our situation. And this verse, I think, is doing both. We've got this list of things: attachment, attainment, karma, birth, effect, etc. And we're brought to the goal like fire. We're drawn to the light. We're drawn to the warmth and the light. That is, once we've begun looking for it. And it'd be nice to believe that most of us at some point actually question our situation. Most of us, most of the time, do not question our situation. We just get on with things. We get on with what we believe needs to be got on with. We don't think about it. We don't think beyond the conventions that we're brought up to believe in. We don't question our own sensibilities, our own moods. We simply go along with them. And this is what's meant by attachment. Attachment. We are intensely attached to our own sensibilities. Our own sensibilities give us the excuse to be indignant, to be outraged, to be angry, to feel hard done by, to feel misunderstood, to feel unloved. We don't question these because they seem to be going on quite deeply. And it's this not questioning which is attachment. And so we operate from our sensibilities, and we try and make the most of the cards that are dealt to us. We find ourselves in a certain situation in this world, a certain economic status perhaps, or a certain social status. We've got certain connections, certain relations, family, friends, certain work opportunities, or lack of work opportunities. So we get by somehow. We try and get what we can out of this. And this is focusing on attainment, attachment, attainment. And so we get on with certain activities. This is karma. We get on with behaving in a certain way, which defines the sort of world that we live in. This is birth, the next thing in the list. And of course, this has consequences. It has effects. And unless we can free ourselves from attachments, unless we start questioning our own sensibilities, we just get caught up in the whole thing once again of attainments, reaching out for attainments, karma, birth, effect. That's what the etc. means. It just goes on and on and on. But it's saying that by reason of this, we're brought to the goal like fire. So the point here is that after a while, we do start questioning. Why keep on going through this? At some point we sort of come to our senses, or come to something beyond our senses, and we start looking for something deeper. And possibly we'll actually come into contact with the Dharma. There's probably all sorts of other things we can get into contact with along the way, which might give some kind of promise. But the reason I'm doing these verses is, having looked around for quite a considerable time, there doesn't seem to be anything which takes us as deep as the wisdom teachings of ancient India, of China, and perhaps from one or two other places. So we're brought to the goal like fire. It's not easy. We have to transcend our sensibilities, which means we need to become aware of our sensibilities and stop reacting in accordance with them. Something which I've described as like not scratching the itchy spot. And when you've got an itchy spot and you don't scratch it, it burns. It really burns. It's unbearable. But you have to not scratch it. Otherwise you're just giving in to your sensibilities once again. So this is the fire, this is the burning fire. And if you don't scratch it, eventually it gives up. Eventually it gives up. When you scratch an itchy spot, it damages it, inflames it further, leaves scars. But if you don't scratch it, okay, it's very, very uncomfortable. But if you can focus your intention on something grander, something more wonderful, rather than have it collapsing onto that itchy spot, then it eventually subsides and you've clocked up one notch of freedom from your sensibilities, from your attachment, from this cycle of entrapment. You've clocked up one notch towards freedom. And we're told that in the last part of this verse, there is resemblance and non-resemblance in the principle. And I think this principle is the principle of like attracting like. Our essential nature is one of pure consciousness. This is where we're coming from right now. This isn't an abstract concept. Consciousness is essentially pure. The consciousness in you, which is hearing this, is essentially pure. And if you come back to that, you've stepped beyond your sensibilities. And it's this pure consciousness which is ultimately, fundamentally, underlyingly looking for something. Is why you're looking into the Dharma. So I think this is all this last part is saying. So the translation is a bit uncertain, but I think it is simply the principle of like attracting like. It is pure consciousness, seeing the truth reflected in the teachings of the Dharma. They are like a reflection of pure consciousness. In fact, they reflect pure consciousness back on itself. And this is what's happening. This is what these verses are doing. They are reflecting us back to the pure consciousness, the consciousness in you that is hearing this. And if you can rest in this, well, you should find great peace, you should find relief, and you've got access to something very deep, very true, something beyond all your anxieties, all your sensibilities, all your beliefs, and it's something you can turn to, or practice turning to, at any time during the day. And when you forget, you can turn to these verses and perhaps these videos as a help, as a reminder. So the language is changing somewhat, but this helps us keep it fresh.